back everyone to the online symposium, Food Innopolis International Symposium 2020. And before we start the panel discussion, if there is any question, please send to Q&A box. The speaker will be pleased to answer all your questions at the end of the session under the topic, World Innovation Cafe, Innovation and Entrepreneurship.
Please join me in welcoming Mr. Jonathan Teoh, FVNL Entrepreneurship Manager of Food Valley, the Netherlands. Mr. Camphuis, Co-founder, FoodTech Expert, ShakeUpFactory, France. Ms. Noga, Sela, Shalev, Vice President, Business Development, Fresh Start, FoodTech Incubator.
And moderated by Dr. Roger van Hoesel, Chief Executive Officer, Food Mountain, the Netherlands. Please welcome.
So good afternoon. Good afternoon, Bangkok. It's good to be back, although this time virtually. Very nice to participate in the Food Innopolis TME conference on this really important topic of entrepreneurship and innovation at the World Innovation Cafe. Today we have a great panel, I would say, of three people who are very experienced in working with entrepreneurs, with young companies, and I think we'll have a fantastic exchange of views and perspectives about how it works, what is working and what is not working, and what the challenges are. For instance, if we talk about COVID-19, what the role of entrepreneurship can be in that respect. So what I would first like to do is introduce the panelists to you. That is Noga, Sela, Shalev from Israel. Noga, you've been in this role not that long, but the initiative itself is also new, and in a way it's also stated in the name, Fresh Start FoodTech Incubator. So my question to you is, what is fresh about this initiative, and what attracted you to work in this role?
Okay, so hi everybody, thank you for having me. In short, Israeli innovation in general is a big deal, and food tech innovation in Israel is booming all the time. So our incubator is part of the Israeli Innovation Authority program. It's a second incubator in Israel for food tech, oriented in food tech. And I think what's new about it, if you like, is the fact that it's part of kind of a bigger plan that is funded by the Israeli Ministry of Economy to create a agro-food cluster in the north of Israel. So they're kind of funding different types of infrastructures that are all oriented to support agro-food startups to kind of boom in the north of Israel, leveraging the kind of geographic proximity of academia and industry and investors that are coming into the area. And I think the approach in general, though it's part of kind of an ongoing program that's been in Israel for a few years now, is in two ways. One, being a part of a larger chain that's going to happen in the area, a larger operation that's happening in the area. And specifically in our incubator, we have a very good balance between financial partners and industrial partners, kind of giving a very good perspective for startups coming into this area. And just a word about myself, I've been in the food industry in Israel for over a decade now, and I'm looking on innovation from within the industry. I've established and managed the innovation unit within Noga, which is Israel's biggest food company. And I thought it was a time to move on and kind of be hands-on with the startups, helping them out and kind of bringing them to life. So that's me.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Noga. Then I would like to go to Kevin Camphuis. Kevin has been in the industry for a longer time as well. Also has worked for, among others, for a very big company, Group SAB, but is also the founder of the ShakeUpFactory, which I found out only recently that it has been around for only 5 years, but it's so well known. So I assumed it was around for a longer time. But the name, again, ShakeUpFactory, was it that we need to shake up the industry? Were we sleeping? Kevin, could you tell us a bit why you started it and what your role is at the moment?
Two questions in one. Why did I start? Because 10 years ago, in the company I was 10 years ago, 2010 was the emergence of or the the arrival of iPad and App Store. And it was very new to the market. And for a hardware company like the company I was in, seeing that coming was quite disturbing. And I went to my boss and said, those guys, they are about to define new paradigm, and we need to adapt or to anticipate. And this is where I started a studio lab internally in this large leading corporation to start making some open innovation and collaboration with startups. And at that time, I had a chance to meet with a lot of entrepreneurs. I didn't have any clue about entrepreneurship and startups, but I discovered that there were startups and startups dealing with food and with food and tech. And it was very new to me, and surprisingly, it was also very new for most of the other corporate guys I was dealing with on a regular basis. And there I understood that this industry would be shaken by startups. But nobody was ready for that. And this is where I started ShakeUpFactory to, at the same time, help startup like in a factory to scale faster, but also to shake the traditional food industry to understand that they will need to adapt and to work with startups. And so this is the purpose of ShakeUpFactory, which is at the same time to help startup grow and accelerate faster, but also build mutually benefiting collaborations with corporations to help them scale and to also help invent what the future of food will be.
Interesting. Thank you. Thank you. Jonathan.
Morning.
Good morning. Yeah, you started from the other side, so to say, not a big industry, but you started in a small industry. Actually, you were one of the founders of a well-known coffee chain in the Netherlands. But then at the beginning of this year, you took this unusual decision to enter the fascinating but also somewhat complicated world of Food Valley with science and big players like universities and industry, of course. To work in entrepreneurship from there. Tell us why. Why did you do it? And what is your role over there?
Well, interesting question, Roger. Thank you very much. First of all, good afternoon, everybody in Bangkok. Thank you for having me. And yes, it was quite a big leap. And to be honest, a lot of people were surprised by me making that decision. But I tend to like jumping into great new unknowns. And I think the main driver was, well, actually in chats with you, Roger, that I noticed that there's a lot of innovation in the Food Valley ecosystem, but innovation doesn't always equal entrepreneurship. And a lot of people who are dealing with entrepreneurs not necessarily have an entrepreneurial background. And so actually it was a great challenge for me. And I gladly accepted that challenge to come from an entrepreneurial background, building my own startup, scale up into an SME, and using those insights to basically counterbalance what was already happening in the ecosystem. Because there are a lot of great initiatives, but sometimes they are more supply driven than demand driven, and understanding what these entrepreneurs are looking for and what really makes a difference in their development is key. So I thought a lot of things could be improved, and also I thought I could learn a lot myself from all these very interesting colleagues I have from the academic field. And 6 months in, that turns out to be true. COVID has made it a bit more challenging, I think, than everybody anticipated. But so far, it's been a great journey.
Okay, maybe one. Thank you, Jonathan. Maybe one additional question related to this, because for those of you who have been to Wageningen, you will meet people of Start Life, Box, Blue Ocean Accelerator, Scale Up Nation, FVNL, all of them deal with young companies. So could you explain a bit how that works?
Well, I think that works because in the Netherlands we tend to like to fund a lot of different initiatives, and in Dutch we say "let 1,000 flowers bloom," and that has very positive sides because you get a lot of different initiatives, but it also has challenging sides because support is separated amongst all these different organizations, and well, there is communication, but there's very little collaboration. So that's one of the things I aim to establish, and also to come up with, let's say, an ecosystem strategy, not only organizational strategies, and really identifying the most promising companies that can really impact the food system.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, guys. Hey, another question I would say is pretty fascinating. That's the whole emergence of these kind of initiatives on food entrepreneurship. If Silicon Valley has been around for a long, long time, it of course dealt with primarily, certainly in those days, with electronics and IC and all that. And when it comes to food startups, it's much, much younger. It has become popular at a later stage in time. Now, over the last few years, we have seen all kinds of initiatives in different parts of the world. Could you say, is there any, if you look at the entrepreneurship in food, it must be a reason why you talk about shaking up and, and fresh start and all that. Could you already see a kind of development in that? Is the food industry becoming more dynamic already, or is it still like this, kind of conservative industry that once in a while has a new company, but it goes slow? Would any one of you like to comment on this? Can you find any development? Can you see it in entrepreneurship in food already? Kevin, would you like to start?
I could, looking back 5 years ago, I would say that we were kind of crying in the desert, talking about startups to big corporation which didn't have any clue of what it was meaning at all. But it also was at that time, 5 years ago, that we could organize the first ever international FoodTech startup contest. The first one in Israel. The first one in San Francisco, but the second one in Israel, in fact. And 5 years ago, we could see some pioneers in the corporate side having a look at it and saying, oh, what does it mean? The point to me is that what I understood this time is that for most food corporations, they were all talking about innovation, but in fact it wasn't innovation. I think that for more than 50 years, the food industry has been dealing with gradual improvement. So perfection, improvement of processes and also costs, but not innovation at all. Innovation is something that is very new to food, very recent, and this is one of the reasons why the food and ag are the two least digitalized or disrupted industry yet. However, it took, I would say, less than 5 years to have the big guys totally change their mind about what innovation means and start initiating open innovation initiatives in many different ways and approaches that still are under perfection, clearly. Everybody is looking at how can it work and how can we be efficient there. So it's still under development, but the change is there, and I can sense it anywhere around the world, even in Asia. And Asia is about to even, I would say, take somehow some lead on food innovation or breakthrough innovation in food.
Yeah. And Kevin, if you would, if I would ask you the question, that's a question they often pose to me, like what is now the Tesla in food? Eh? Everyone's looking for Tesla in food. Is there going to be one? Would you say, well, if you think in these kind of terms, real innovation in food, then this is going to be the topic where we are going to amaze the world? Or is it hard to say?
I would say that food is a world in itself.
Yeah.
And I'm just amazed of the complexity and the variety of this value chain, and how it can be disrupted by anyone at any stage of the value chain.
Yeah.
Would it be by ingredients or microorganisms to delivery technologies? So there will not be one, but tens of Teslas.
Okay.
And this is the reason why it started to become a business.
Interesting. Yeah. Noga, Jonathan, would you like to add or comment?
I think Kevin makes... Oh, sorry. No,
go ahead. It's okay. Go ahead. No, that's fine.
Okay. I think Kevin makes a very strong point. Food is a world on itself. And I think one of the developments we see is that when you talk about open innovation, it's not only open within the food and ag, but it's also open to other industries. For example, waste streams of food being used as building materials. And like Kevin already indicated, tech coming in. So open innovation is also really about connecting all these different ecosystems and learning from each other's innovation as well.
I absolutely agree. I was actually going to say that what we see, I think, right now is exactly that. The fact that innovation and technology that used to be part of other industries, maybe in a way there were some barriers in terms of the margins that you can see in the food industry, the very hard to enter infrastructures that are a huge barrier, and the very, I'd say, frightening regulation that you have to deal with. But I think that the idea of there's a necessity, there is actually no other way but to solve these issues, has finally opened the gates. So what we see right now is a lot of technologies coming from other areas. And as Kevin pointed out, the value chain is so wide and so full of opportunities for change that it's only reasonable to see these technologies coming in. And I think that one of the biggest accelerators of this thing is the fact that there's much more open-mindedness of looking for other solutions, understanding exactly the fact that it's enough to, we have no more opportunities in seeking food tech within food tech. We have to open up and kind of bring new technologies in order to make the big disruption, the big leap that we're looking for in order to solve the issues that we are trying to deal with. So I absolutely agree. This is exactly what we're seeing right now. And I think, the term bioconvergence of seeing technologies coming from the medical field or from, of course, AI and big data solutions coming into the value chain, improving it end to end, is something. It's really exciting to see how this is actually happening right now. And we're in some sort of I'd say even a revolution that we can see in this industry happening in front of our eyes right now, with the investments coming in, with more and more entrepreneurs understanding that there's a lot to do in this area. So yeah, it's pretty intense right now.
This,
and there's a great sense of urgency, I think, because I can't think of another industry that has a closer relationship with Mother Nature than food. I mean, we reap the benefits of Mother Earth, and I think generations around the globe see that building a sustainable and accessible food system is probably one of the most important keys to building a sustainable world. And because the food industry is also so big, it can also initiate a lot of other positive changes, whether it's water or energy, maybe even preventing mass immigration, and so there's a lot of positive side effects when we are able to lay this very complicated puzzle of building a resilient and accessible food system for everybody.
But Jonathan, don't you think that, I fully agree, but don't you think that in terms of acceptance by the public or by consumers, if it comes to injecting, let's say, these kind of technologies, is somewhat more difficult? And as you say, that's always why I felt talking about Teslas is uncomfortable in the food industry, because people step in this car, this is a cool car, it's on electricity, so I want to buy it. Whereas here we talk about complicated value chains, and we talk about AI and biotechnology and all that. And often people will respond to that, this is scary. I just want to have food on my plate, and it has to taste really good. So isn't this one of the challenges, that there's a big gap between what is possible in a technological sense and what consumers are going to accept?
Yeah, you see me shifting on my chair because I think there's something that we've overlooked for a very long time, and that's how do we influence consumer behavior? Because you say changing people's diets is challenging, but we've been able to get the whole world to drink Red Bull. So if we can get people to drink a sugary drink they don't need, we should be able to get the whole world eating the food they need to make positive change. It's all about combining technological innovations with social innovations, and really understanding how consumers make decisions. Because very often when we talk about sustainability, we try to address the rational part of people's brain. But once we start making decisions in the products we buy, the clothes we wear, it's an emotional process. And that's exactly why we need open innovation, because we have to collaborate with social scientists who understand how we make decisions. And if we can give these many great talented entrepreneurs we meet every day access to, just 25% of the marketing savviness that the McDonald's and the Red Bulls and the Teslas of this world have, we can make a huge change.
Okay.
May I add to your reflection the fact that I think that the food industry underestimates up to which extent the public is ahead. And this is probably what makes the period we're living in at the moment very different. If you've been used to work in an industry that hasn't changed since 50 years, you don't even look at the initial elements that can make you feel that there is something changing. But this change, we see it since 5 to 10 years. It's been very small, but you really see it in a way, for example, how vegans are emerging, in the way how food waste is becoming a subject, in a way the crowd is challenging plastics. It doesn't come from nowhere. And it's not one day over the other. It's just gradual. But we start now looking at it as professionals, whereas we didn't see any of that before. So those new technologies that are coming to food, would it be genetics, AI, or data science, they will have a massive change. Some of them will, at the very beginning, be somehow disgusting or unadapted, but at the end, they will all deeply change or make deep breakthrough in this hold industry for sure.
Completely agree. And I think that in that sense, first of all, just to say, a lot of the innovation does not actually meet the consumer face to face. I mean, a lot of it happens in the value chain, in the back end, and there's a lot to do there before even meeting the challenge of kind of convincing the consumer to eat this or that. And on top of that, I'd say that a lot of the innovation is actually, as Kevin pointed out, answering the demand coming from consumers already. So there's so much to do already before entering kind of the challenging areas of, I don't know, cultured meat or kind of novel ingredients that have to be convinced to be added. And in addition to that, I'd like to say that the trends are indeed changing. There are a lot of consumers, younger aged, if you like, that the level of attention they have to matters of sustainability, to matters of even moral consumption or ethics in their food is something that becomes a very strong driver in some areas, even overcoming the basic ideas of pricing and specific flavors and so on and so forth. So the dynamics in the consumer's perspective of what they eat. And this is not to say that it doesn't have to be tasty, because it has to be tasty. That's the first kind of barrier. But there's a lot of openness to try out, and there's a lot of demands from the industry to kind of move forward and to take responsibility in closing the gaps that you can see. So I think it's something that's going on, and it is gradual, absolutely. But the dynamics are coming from all edges, from the industry, from consumers, from innovators coming into the realm. So it's all happening together right now. And I think that it's going to speed up much, much faster than we've seen so far.
Good to hear. Now we have to address another challenge. And that's the challenge of COVID-19. It would be strange in this year to ignore what has happened to all of us throughout the world. And of course, there have been many debates on the impact on the industry. But if we focus on your daily activities on working with entrepreneurs, could you describe what you have seen in terms of the impact on the entrepreneurship? Is it like more people knock on the door, less people, different kind of ideas pop up? Is there anything to ready to see now in terms of change?
I would say, in one sense, that we see a lot more in one day, having the virtual platform, making it very accessible. So in that sense, I guess it's actually a positive impact, so to speak, of the deal flow. I mean, the interaction is much more intense. And in some ways, much less formal, I guess, in many, many ways. So in that manner, I think it's a positive impact. Of course, there is a specific implication of the areas or the fields of innovation. Yeah. And naturally, I think everybody knows that the delivery or the delivery systems of food and door-to-door and so on, and the impact of that field is pretty obvious. We don't see a reduction in the deal flow at all. I mean, we see it just increasing all the time. So I'd say, I can't say it's impacted by COVID-19, but it's rather not interfered by it, I guess, in a way.
Oh, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. And Kevin, how's that in your case in France?
I would say that first of all, food is one of the least impacted industry yet. Yeah. Even put food and innovation in food at the forefront of the needed changes or the needed support to adapt to the many constraints of COVID. So the activity is more intense. I would say that, as Noga said, the opportunity to share much more openly with the world, which is incredible. I would say that the public is even accelerating its sensibility to the need for some key changes in terms of transparency, trust, safety, and all those stuff. I would say there are two ways in which the food tech industry, I would say the nascent food tech industry, may be impacted. First is on the restaurants, so out of home side. If you're not a tech project, you will hardly survive, or you will have to go to freezer until you can come back. And for some big R&D, I would say deep tech projects, not having the opportunity to keep on having access to a lab is somehow complex, and it has put some delay on some big tech projects for food.
Yeah. It's not like you could have guessed for, there have been so many stories about impact of certain nutrition on COVID, combating COVID. It's not like you see that there's different kind of startups that address these specific topics in a certain way.
Slowly, personal nutrition is getting an extra push.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Yeah.
But then there are a lot of different definitions of personal nutrition, and I also see that a lot of companies are hesitant and cautious about claiming effectiveness, and I think this year we've had a interesting relationship with science, also with world leaders around the world embracing science or trying to defy it. So for a startup to come out and claiming effectiveness of a nutrition is risky. I think, however, that other trends have had like Noga says, a real positive push in the right direction. I think generations of people around the world have been shocked by empty shelves in supermarkets, something many of us have never seen in our lifetime. So that made us wonder about the resilience of our food system and the supply chain, and a new focus on local initiatives. I see a lot of local bakeries and butchers and grocery stores going online. And this is not a startup initiative, but this is
survival.
But survival, but maybe even long-term survival of our inner cities.
Yeah, it's acceleration of change.
It is.
Acceleration of adaptation to new user expectations. Yes.
Yeah. But all of a sudden, I see these initiatives, and I don't know if they can battle Amazon and all the others, but I see initiatives of local merchants who now are online, who weren't online 6 months ago, and at least they have a fighting chance now. So I think, okay, and these bakeries on our street corners, they are part of the livelihood of our neighborhood. So I think there's a lot of positive takeouts as well, and
surprisingly, to answer your question, Roger, I think that the answer to COVID, or to what people have as question behind COVID on food, is less in personalized nutrition, and more what we've seen in France and in many late Latin countries, which is people going back to cooking by themselves and paying much more attention to what it takes to make good food, to combine ingredients, to provide not only pleasure but also health and balance to the whole family. What it takes to make and to cook every day, the time it takes, where the ingredients come from, what are they made of, how they combine together, and it's more personal food or personal learning on food than personalized nutrition, which to some extent is not mature enough or not or too rational and not embedded with the relevant support to be the answer that the market is expecting for the moment.
Nice, yeah. Yeah, food is also emotion, to a very large extent.
And comfort.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons why we all go or stay around the table for 1 hour.
Absolutely. Yeah, in Holland it's somewhat shorter. I joke. Hey, but no, thank you so much for these insights. I would, if that's okay with you, I would like to turn to the core of your business, supporting startups and growing them into bigger companies. Noga, I mistakenly used the expression Scale Up Nation, because there is an organization in the Netherlands called Scale Up Nation, and they have a program called Scale Up Food. And well, as the name already indicates, they say we only focus on scale-ups. And if you would go to their website, the first thing you will see is, gosh, do you know that only 0.04% of all companies scale? And actually, the guy who is in charge of that was in this meeting of TMA last year. He was in Bangkok. He was selling his story. So yeah, his claim is we shouldn't have paid so much attention to all these startups, way too many startups, and then after that something goes wrong. And what? And that is a big question. If you look at how much effort the world puts, all these governments and companies put in having new companies start, and whereas only so few come out of it as a bigger company. What is, if you would look at that issue, what is there to be done to overcome this and increase this percentage? Because that has to happen in one way or another.
What the incubator is basically all about. I first of all just say statistics is statistics. We can see this in literally every industry, that there's a funnel eventually about what startups actually make it and reach the market. I do agree that within the food industry, the barriers, as I said earlier, are higher. In that manner, and I think this is precisely what incubators such as Fresh Start are all about, is first of all defining the exact need of the industry to make it easier to find kind of someone that's willing to buy the solution that you're offering. So that's kind of the first step in any startup, I guess. But in this case, the client is not necessarily the end consumer, but rather the food industry that has to make it happen eventually. Going forward, it's Fresh Start's agenda, and I guess literally everybody that has to do with FoodTech today, to find the right partners as early as possible to assist in aligning. To use a different word, we want to take the innovation itself. We don't necessarily have to innovate all the surrounding themes that have to do with it in order to make it happen. Actually, quite on the contrary, we want to align as much as possible where it is possible to align and allow the innovation itself to be implemented. It's kind of smaller steps, I guess. We don't boom and disrupt everything. We try to work with the very robust and complex systems that are already existing in the industry, and innovating in these specific areas in which the technology can make the difference, and figuring out how to make it happen, how to allow an easier implementation, starting from the very beginning of how the technology is designed, the exact go-to-market in which we want to operate to make it as easy as possible, finding the right people from within the industry that will be accepting of the idea, will be supporting of the way it could be designed and even changed in a way in order to make it easier to get in. That's the work that we're doing. And it's sometimes, if you don't come from within the industry, it's very hard to even imagine the complexity that you have to deal with. And I think that's part of the problem. And part of the job of an incubator such as Fresh Start is to mediate this gap and actually put in front of any entrepreneur the huge challenges they're supposed to address in order to allow them the opportunity to figure them out and try to work their way through it from the very beginning, designing their whole solution to target this end. Now, this sounds like a very nice story, and it's very hard sometimes to make it happen eventually, but I guess that some of it has to do with the awareness of just how huge the struggle is. And minimize the risks as much as possible by working hand in hand with the industry. And I think what Kevin pointed out earlier is that you see more and more acceptance of multinational companies of this type of innovation. So they are more and more willing to open their doors and kind of let entrepreneurs in to peek and understand how they should operate, what they should do in order to make things easier and more acceptable and eventually happen. So I hope this answers your question in a nutshell, but that's the biggest issue, and this is what we are focused on.
Okay, thank you. Well, there's an interesting question actually from the audience coming in on this, and it's from the perspective of the corporate. So the question is, how can corporate benefit more from working with startups or entrepreneurs when they are so different in many aspects? So not what can startups gain from corporates, but the other way around?
We should have 1 hour and a half to cover this.
I know.
But to
give it a try.
But I had the opportunity to organize, I would say, 3 years ago, and it was in Israel, in fact, a one-day face-to-face between startups and corporations to just raise this question and try to find an answer.
Yeah.
And to make a long story short, corporations have to understand that there is such a gap that they will need bridge builders, like people like we are, Noga, Jonathan, or maybe you also, Roger, which are people who have been living in the industry and have the language and the understanding of what it takes to make innovation happen in big companies, but also work at the side of entrepreneurs every day and speak also their language. And so we are the go-betweeners that are needed to make first understanding, then alignment, then collaboration efficiently happen. And in most cases, in big corporation, I meet with people who are, as they are paid to make it happen, they believe that it's their role to make it happen by themselves. And when it's about collaboration with startups, it doesn't work. It's as if I would ask the R&D, the guys in charge of R&D to purchase ingredients. It's not his role. Same for collaboration with startups. He has to be clear about what he wants, what he can provide as resources, deliver with clear specification and expectations, but he cannot be the one in charge of knowing how or what it will take to make it happen. So you need to rely on third parties like people like we are.
Yeah, thank you. Could you also, Kevin, add a bit on the scale-up difficulty? Yeah? Is it, if you look at what comes in your case, in ShakeUpFactory, it's really small companies. I don't know how many have grown. Yeah, 5 years. It's difficult to say. But if you look at them and if you assess them, how many would you say have the potential to grow into a SME, a serious SME, for instance? And what are the most important difficulties you see in this process?
I would say that the first thing is a question of mindset.
Yeah.
I see too few people having the true ambition to make a big project happen, and or entrepreneurs having understood that France, for example, is not enough if you want to make a project. So first, the entrepreneurial mindset and I would say the scope of ambition of entrepreneurs. I see too many people having not enough ambition about their project first. And the second thing is you really need to build the fertile ground to make projects in a large sense really scale at the size of their true potential. And when we're talking about fertile ground, it will be, as we said, an entrepreneur, I would say, a corporate environment that is open to collaboration with startups. Because as Noga said, 70% of FoodTech projects will be suppliers to either the industry or to food retailers or to restaurants. And so if food companies, retailers, or restaurants are not open to collaborate with newcomers, those newcomers will not emerge from your environment. And the one that will deploy are the one coming with the most funding. And what I'm trying to do here in France is create the environment that will make projects of French origin deploy before outsiders come in and take the market.
Yeah. Thank you. Jonathan, do you have anything to add to this?
I think many good points are already pointed out, but I would also like to add that we talk a lot about entrepreneurship, and I think we still have a lot to gain in better understanding what are the crucial entrepreneurial skill sets entrepreneurs need and how we can help them acquire these by either learning or developing themselves, or also bringing in talent from outside the ecosystem. I've been talking about this a bit more already. And I see a lot of pre-revenue companies working on a discounted cash flow valuation model. And I think, what are you doing? You should be building a robust company now. If you, like Kevin said, if you have a big ambition, focus on the fundamentals of that business. If you want to build a skyscraper, you first focus on the fundamentals of that skyscraper, and you want to make sure that the fundamentals of the skyscraper are really strong and can support the big building you want to build. And very often, I see companies that are so focused on a valuation and they get so hyped up by all these big exits that they think, okay, it always seems that becoming a millionaire is the aim and not impacting the food system. But the only way to impact a food system sustainably, and I don't mean green, but sustainable in the sense that your company can survive in the years to come, is building a robust company. And that means also investing in things which are boring. And because these boring things are the things you need to scale. So when we had 3 stores, we invested in IT systems, in data systems, in a lot of things that weren't fitting for a company with only 3 locations, but we knew they would be fitting for a company with 20 locations. And that meant that our work didn't increase 7-fold when we grew from 3 to 20 locations. And it's these things, exactly like Kevin says, having the right mindset and knowing where more or less you want to go, that you can start planning for that journey today, and also leave out a lot of the things you don't have to do.
If I may add about our experience here in France, and it somehow builds on what I hear from Jonathan, and it's somehow also the opposite to what is happening in Israel. I will explain myself. A French entrepreneur is blind in the sense that he thinks that his project is made for France. A Dutch entrepreneur thinks for Netherlands. An Israeli entrepreneur thinks for the world, because Israel is too small. And so from day one, they have huge ambition. And in fact, it happens that Israel is at the convergence of Eastern and Western countries. So they can speak at the same time with Singapore and Bangkok and with San Francisco. And I think that this question of mindset is absolutely key. And as an entrepreneur, you cannot think for your sole local market.
Yeah.
It's nonsense.
Yeah.
The Danone and Nestle's of the world didn't think for Switzerland and for France.
No. Yeah, that's interesting.
So
Yeah.
it starts by this, and then a local fertile grounds to make it happen. And this is where combining any of the stakeholders of this complex value chain, which is the most siloed value chain I've ever seen, is absolutely necessary. And this is where local ecosystems are needed to break those silos and make every of the stakeholders collaborate together to make it happen.
Yeah.
And it will first improve food and add sustainability and resilience to local food systems. And on top of that, it may create future food champions for the world.
Interesting. This, now that you say this brings me to this other intriguing question. When we started in Wageningen with thinking about entrepreneurship, the assumption was that you could spin them out from the university. Then we have bright minds at the university, smart people. And if you have a kind of support program for them, you have companies in the end. I put it in a simple way, but it was more or less the assumption. Now you see in the end that there's many people coming to these places, but from the outside world, basically. And one of the intriguing questions related to what you just all said about mindset and ambition, all that, is it? Can you? My question that pops up now is it? Can you turn people into entrepreneurs, or are you born as an entrepreneur? Can you train this, going through your support programs, or can you only train, let's say, how you do the accounting and all that? But you have to be it, yes or no? Oh.
to some extent, I guess some can be taught, but I think eventually, and as an investment vehicle, this is what you're looking at. You're looking first and foremost at the people that are supposed to lead this through the very hard times until you get the funds, until you can buy the right people to the right positions. And I think that the core of it, I'm not sure you can actually teach it. I think in some sense, some people have this ambition that we talked about. Some people have the resilience to withstand the really hardships of the way and the kind of the roller coaster that is the life of an entrepreneur. But some of it can be taught. Some of it in terms of the methods, the perspectives, the ability maybe to listen, to learn, to collaborate. Some of these can be taught and can guide entrepreneurs to improving themselves, getting their very core essence, which is unteachable, but then kind of adapting it into ways that are a bit more maybe beneficial for developing down the road. But I guess there is part of it that either you have it or you don't. This is my understanding after seeing really so many projects. Yeah.
I think very often with solutions that start at universities is that it starts with a solution. And there's a pitfall there that you try to optimize the solution. And if this team lacks the entrepreneurial spirit where you are keen on understanding your customers' problems, your solution will never fit those problems. So with a lot of these companies, I see they have amazing technologies, but they spend most of their focus, most of their energy on optimizing these technologies, whereas their focus should be on understanding industry and customer challenges and then trying to adapt your solution in that direction. Because otherwise you can spend 15 years building a solution and nobody wants to buy it.
Many people, by the way, so that stayed a startup for 10 years and they grew older and older and nothing really happened, actually.
No, but to some extent, due to the importance tech is taking at the moment, too many people think that the solution is in tech. And in fact, even a FoodTech project, or I would say even more, when there is tech in a food project, tech is less important than go-to-market.
Yeah.
And I would say that the success of a food project is 70% or 80% go-to-market and 20% tech. To make it simple, anybody can access tech today, or it's not that much complex. Or if you would need it, you can find it. The question is, how do I build the bricks together? How do I make the right team? And how do I perfect my value proposition to make it understandable by the market and accessible to users and adoptable, I would say, by users as quick as possible? And so it's less a question of tech than value proposition, so go-to-market and collaboration spirit in the team, because no entrepreneur has the required set of know-how and expertise to make it by himself.
Exactly.
You see that the ones that are succeeding are the ones who've been able to build the required collaboration in terms of skills, know-how, expertise, and people around them.
Yeah, and they hire people better than themselves, and they're not frightened by this. And I couldn't agree more, Kevin, that we often focus on disruption, and we think disruption is this one thing, but very often disruption is a combination of new and existing technologies, and then being presented to an audience. And so you're almost a mechanic trying to find all these aspects that really build your business, and it hardly ever starts with just one technique. So understanding how your economic engine of your company is going to run is, I think, the number one thing an entrepreneur should be focusing on. Because whether you like it or not, and I see some people in food which are so concerned with all our public challenges that they think money is a disgusting thing and you shouldn't chase after a commercial business model. But money is like the oil that runs an engine, or maybe today the electricity that runs your Tesla. You need it to power this beast you're building, this company you're building, and you need it to hire better people. You need it to purchase these facilities you need to further develop. So understanding what makes your economic engine run is crucial.
Hey guys, thank you. Thank you so much. We have 3.5 minutes left, but we have also one more question of the audience. So that could be a kind of a final statement. And the question is, what are key innovations that you come across and think these will significantly change the industry in the near future? So what did you see where you think we touched upon it already briefly earlier during this hour, but what are the things you've seen where you say, well, this is going to really change the industry? Maybe Jonathan, can I start with you? Sure, you have 1 minute, by the way. So,
no, I'll keep it very short. If I can choose one thing, I wouldn't choose on a particular key innovation. I would focus on what's already been discussed here, is listening to the audience, listening to the customers. They demand a better system, and many of the solutions are already here. It's for us to find the collaborations between startups and within the supply chain to deliver these products. So we can be more bold and push existing innovations and maybe find innovation in the way we work together. And I think a lot of the new skills we've learned through COVID, because all of a sudden we are able to communicate with people from all over the world easily, and hopefully that can have a positive effect on our understanding of what our customers want and how we can apply a lot of the innovation and technologies which are already here.
Thank you. Kevin?
I would say two things. First is sustainable agriculture in a large sense, and more precisely, any of the regenerative agriculture approaches and practices that are just about to emerge and which will have a deep and profound impact on how we raise food. And the second one is biotechnologies applied to food. Those are, to me, the two most disrupting changes that will happen to food in the coming 5 years.
Thank you. Noga, we'll end with you. We started with you, we end with you. So what would you be?
I'd say, first of all, I want to refer to what you said in the near future. Near in food is a very challenging concept to begin with. It takes a while here. I strongly relate to Kevin's emphasis, and I will only add the improvements of the value chain through AI solutions. I think that giving room for extra finance to support all the innovation we are seeing, which is really, it's various and it goes throughout the whole value chain. I think that is something that is key, and given the data that is throughout the value chain, there's a lot of areas of data, and the ability to streamline them and operate them well, reducing waste and allowing that extra funds for doing all the rest is something that will support the system as a whole. So I will end by that.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, dear panelists, it's 20 seconds left. That's what we see here. So I think we will go back to Bangkok now. So I would like to thank you so much, Noga, Kevin, Jonathan, for this really interesting conversation we had on this important topic. And I wish you all luck with your endeavors in the coming period.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Teoh, Mr. Camphuis, Ms. Shalev, and Dr. Van Hoesel for an interesting talk.
Before the next section begins, let's have a short break and we'll be back in a few minutes.